So I read They Both Die at the End by Adam Silvera, and I loved this. Why have I not read this sooner? If I think about it, I am always quite hesitant to pick up books that are well known for being book talk books. Like, this is a book that went like viral. And so when that happens, I'm always a bit, skeptical, because I feel like I can flip a coin and half of them I'll really enjoy and then half of them I'll be like, what on earth is this? Especially with YA as well, because I feel like I'm... Not that adults can't read YA, but I feel personally like I'm sort of aging out of the things that I used to really enjoy about young adult fiction, and so it's that added challenge for a writer to do a YA book that also appeals to all ages, and I think this succeeds. I'm trying to remember the last time that I read a book where the subject material was this serious, and yet it was so heartfelt, wholesome, cute. It was a really lovely, like, warm hug of a novel, which is crazy when you know the plot. Like, as the title suggests, they both die at the end. Like, it's upsetting, but it's also, I don't know, it's got this camaraderie to it that really makes it enjoyable. And I love that. I love that the writer just had the gentlest touch. Like, this, I wasn't familiar with Adam Silvera. Such a gentle touch, so much subtlety. I was so impressed. Like, when I compare this to, like, The Midnight Library, this is The Midnight Library done right, because that's another book that has all of these answers for going out there and enjoying life and living in the moment, but it sort of crosses the good taste line and feels a bit insensitive, and the story itself, the accounting of the whole story doesn't really add up. Like, logistically, it's a bit of a mess. This simultaneously is thought-provoking and poignant, but is also an entertaining story with three-dimensional characters. I was like, oh my goodness, like, yes. And it goes back to exactly what I said when I reviewed The Book Thief. I'm always going to prefer books that focus on the journey as opposed to the destination, and that's exactly what this is. I mean, it does exactly what it says on the tin. They both die at the end. People getting upset, being like, oh, well, it was so predictable, it just ended exactly how it said it would. It was like, yeah, that's the point. There's not supposed to be any bells or whistles. I was convinced that the ending was going to have some sort of deus ex machina and some crazy twist that was going to ruin it. But no, it stood the courage of its convictions. It did exactly what it set out to do, and I was like, bravo. I appreciated it. I think this would be a great book for the next generation to read. Like, that's the goal for a YA book. You want to be reading it and think, like, yeah, I would let the children of tomorrow read this. I think it would vastly benefit their thoughts about death and life. It's almost like the Marley and Me of books. It's like, oh, you want to teach your kids about death? Give them this. Because it approaches the subject in a way that is just so matter of fact, but also it's playful with it. Like, the characters have so much, like, banter. I know that's a bit of a trite word now, but there's so much good rapport between our two main characters, and I liked that they were friends first and then, like, boyfriends second. Like, they actually got to know each other, do things together in the space of 24 hours. And so I liked that there was that platonic foundation that a more meaningful connection could then be put on top of, as opposed to some modern romance books where they're just suddenly obsessed with each other, especially in this where they've only got 24 hours together. It could have easily been that, but no, it was measured and reasonable and true to real life, and loved it. Can we talk about, so this edition is like the collector's edition, and it has like some of the first draftings in the back. Can we talk about how Mateo Torres, his initial character name was going to be Wyatt Gonzalez? What? He made the right choice changing that name. Mateo Torres works much better. Can we talk about the music references in this book? Because they were strange. Like, the book is set in 2017, and they're teenagers that were born in, like, the late 90s, early 2000s, and their music taste ranges from, like, Billy Joel to Elton John to like Otis Redding. I was like, what? No, what teenagers? Like, what teenagers? Like, were we supposed to take from that they're like hipsters, or like they're these like old souls? Like real weird deep cuts for teenagers to be listening to. But why weren't they listening to like, I don't know, Dua Lipa? If we are splitting hairs, some of the conversations in this book about gang violence felt very cartoonish and very sort of caricature-esque, but I personally didn't mind that. You know, he wanted to have a bit of, I guess, like the outsiders in it. He wanted to have that sort of, because that is such a big part of city youth culture, you know, getting into gangs and the sort of violent consequences of that. So I think it could have been done a bit better, but either way, this book just has so much heart. Can we also talk about how Mateo fully wouldn't have died if Americans had kettles? You know what I mean? Like, what's that about? Americans, why are you doing your tea on the stove? Like, that can't be all Americans. Some of you must have kettles, because that's basically the catalyst for their deaths. And it's very sad. But of course, in my mind, as a Brit reading this, I'm just like, well, get a kettle. I loved that it wasn't just Rufus and Mateo, that there were other POVs that were sort of sprinkled throughout, so you could get more of a like three-dimensional sort of bird's eye view of this world, because that's the thing as well. It's speculative fiction, but it walks the line so perfectly where everything feels appropriate and thought out. Like, there are so many little Easter eggs and expositional lines that really inform you about the world of Deathcast, and like, oh, okay, I can fully see this happening now because it feels that prescient and well researched. Like, you can tell he thought about it, and that does make a difference, because there are some books like this where you're like, did you think about this at all? Because it goes so beyond the realm of possibility that you're like, nah, I'm not enjoying this fantasy that you've created. This, I liked it an awful lot. So I would recommend this. Realistically, I'm probably the last person on BookTok to have not read it. I feel like this book was a key obsession around 2020, 2021. Of course, I wasn't on BookTok at that point in time, so, you know, I wasn't, I'm a bit late to the party. But oh, so much heart, so much, like, it's saccharine, but in the best way. Like, if you just want fluffy, cute, platonic, romantic, but at the same time serious, heartfelt, this is real life, it's gonna happen to you one day, guess what, Linda, you're gonna die. Like, yes, perfect YA novel in my opinion.